Assalamu alaikum everyone, and welcome back to yet another talk hosted by MCO. If you are live on Facebook, welcome. If you're on Zoom, welcome as well. For your information, the way we are conducting these talks is the speaker will be speaking for approximately half an hour to 40 minutes. And after that, there'll be a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask in the Facebook Live comment field, or you can ask in the Q&A function here on Zoom. So today's guest is Monem Salem. He is no stranger to us. We've known him for some years while he was living in Kuala Lumpur, where he was the portfolio manager and director of Saturna. He's now living in the US, but before that, he was living in Kuala Lumpur, where he was also conducting the khutbahs in one of the local mosques. And he became very famous for his khutbahs because of how practical his khutbahs were. And it was very easy to relate to his talks and khutbahs. Hence, we thought it would be great if you could join us during this session this evening with us. In case you're interested in listening more of Monem's talks, he has a YouTube channel. You can just search for Monem Salem and you'll be able to find several of his talks and khutbahs. Monem, the talk is yours. Thank you very much for joining us.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum everybody. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونتوب إليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا وحبيبنا مولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. All praise is due to Allah, and after that all praise is due to Allah. We thank Him, we seek help from Him, we ask guidance in Him, and we seek refuge in Him from our own evils and from our own bad deeds. Anyone who has been guided by Allah, they are indeed guided, and anyone who has been misguided by Allah, you will never find a guardian to guide them. I bear witness. I bear witness that there is no deity worthy of worship except for Allah, the only one without partner. And I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a servant and his messenger. Salam alaikum and Ramadan Mubarak. It's truly an honor to be here with MCO doing this talk. And hopefully people will benefit. Inshallah, what I'm going to try to do in this short lecture is really talk about living in the current times we are. How do we, especially during the month of Ramadan, right? How do we kind of maybe get rid of some of our anxieties? Now, to be honest with you, like I'm not a scholar. I'm much more of a practitioner, just a regular Muslim. And so everything that I'm about to tell you now, you probably have already heard before. But for me, it's just a nice reminder to be able to say, to think about and kind of reflect upon them. And just remind myself that, that I do need to be able to kind of just always do these kind of practical things that we can do. So inshallah, with that, obviously, why are we talking about this? All right. It's obviously because all of us are either, if you're in Malaysia, it's called the MCO. If you're in the US, like we are here, it's called the stay home, stay safe policy. But basically what's really happened is that you've been locked down. Ramadan's not really the same. You're not able to go for Tarawih if you used to do that every single year. But there are benefits that have come out of it. And I think it's important for us to be able to always remember the different benefits. Like what I keep reminding myself of is, I live maybe, it's a little bit different probably for you, but I live maybe about a half an hour away from the masjid. And so, just for going to Tarawih and coming back used to take me an hour all the way round trip. And now, alhamdulillah, I'm able to use that opportunity to be able to either make dhikr, spend time with my family, just to relax a little bit, take a deep breath and just say, alhamdulillah, everything is fine. And we really don't know exactly how long this is going to last. So I think really talking about this idea of how do we keep our anxiety low is what I want to talk about. So the first thing that I wanted to mention, again, these are going to be hopefully some things you've already heard of, but inshallah, this you will benefit from. The first thing that we always have to have and keep reminding ourselves of is we have to have a reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? When it comes to all of our anxieties, we have to realize that He is the one who's in control. And there's many verses in the Quran, if you're facing some type of a financial hardship, you're facing some type of, those things, it's important for us to remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who is the provider of the rizq, the sustenance that we have. He mentions in Surah Al Imran, verse number 27, he says, you cause the night to enter the day, and you cause the day to enter the night. And you bring the living out of the dead, and you bring the dead out of the living, and you give provision to whom you will without account. بِغَيْرِ hisab, right? So He is the one who is the ultimate provider of everything that we have. In fact, if it was anybody else who was providing, they might be a little bit stingy, but not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In fact, in Surah Isra, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the fact, and He's talking about mercy, but it could be anything that we have as human beings. He is telling mankind, He says that if you were given, right, the mercy of Allah, you will be stingy with it. Imagine that, subhanAllah, right? Is that if we were given the same thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we would still kind of be thinking about it, saying, oh my God, I need to keep it for myself. I don't want to give it out. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives out without any measure, without account of whatever He has, because there is so much. And that's in the majesty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then also in Surah Mulk, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, or who is it that could provide for you if He withheld His provision, but they have persisted in their insolence and their aversion, right? So again, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides He wants to take away, or He decides He wants to give, right, then it's in His control. And this is part of this idea of Qadr that we have. And then the last one that I wanted to mention is in Surah Ankabut, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in verse 60 in translation, and how many a creature carries not its provision, Allah provides for it and for you, and He is the hearing and the knowing, right? So again, here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning that there's nothing in this world, no creature that gets this provision except from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In fact, if you look at majority of the creation, right, they live day to day not knowing exactly where their provision is coming from. And there's a lot of human beings around the world that have the same issue. They wake up every morning and they have to go out there and they have to seek to provision. We've become comfortable in our world to have automatic deposits into our bank account of our salaries and those type of things. But majority of the world lives on a day-to-day basis. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning the fact that no creatures out there that has his own provision, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who actually does that. And so, I'm reminded of a hadith when we were talking about tawakkul, that this is something that always brings comfort to me whenever I think about having these type of things. Is this on the authority of Abu Abbas, Abdullah ibn Abbas, who said, one day I was behind the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he was riding on the same mount, and he said, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Oh young man, I shall teach you some words of advice." And the first thing he says was, be mindful of Allah and Allah will protect you. Be mindful of Allah and you will find Him in front of you. If you ask, then ask Allah. And if you seek help, then seek help from Allah. And know that if the nation were to gather together to benefit you in anything, they would not benefit you except with what Allah has already prescribed for you. And if they were to gather to harm you with anything, they would not harm you except with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already prescribed against you. The pens have been lifted and the pages have been dried, right? So everything is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a very, very comprehensive hadith, and it talks about many, many different aspects of what I'm talking about today. But really it's this idea that, look, there's an ultimate power is in control, and we have to be able to rely on Him. There's a very famous worshipper, pious person named Hatem al-Assam. And he was asked one time, he said, how did you construct your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Right? How did you get tawakkul? Right? Like if tawakkul was a building, what materials did you use? What were the foundations of the tawakkul that you had? And so he said that I built my trust on four aspects. Right? Number one, he said, I came to terms with the fact that my sustenance would not be taken by any other person. right? That whatever he basically, he came to terms with the fact that whatever he has, that's what he's going to get, and not one other person is going to take it away from him, right? Or nor is he going to be able to change whatever provision that he has. That his provision is already written for him. Number two is I came to terms with the fact that my work will not be done by anyone else, so I'm keeping myself busy with those deeds, right? Nobody in this life is going to be able to add good deeds to yourself, to you, not another person to you, except for yourself. Except maybe if you do some sadaqah jariyah, but even then you're the one who planted those seeds. And so whatever you have, you're going to do, it's going to be in your deeds, you're going to have to do it yourself. So he became busy keeping with the deeds that he had. And if, as long as you keep doing those things, then everything else becomes a lot easier. Number three, he said, I came to terms with the fact that death is racing towards me, so I started to race towards it, right? So everybody knows we're basically counting down every single breath that we take, every single second that we have. We're getting what's the one step closer to death. Once he came to that realization, he said, I keep myself busy with the deeds of and racing towards death. And that doesn't mean you're seeking it out. What that means basically is that you are preparing for it, right? Preparing for this inevitability, because the hereafter is real. And the last one he said was, I learned that I learned that I do not escape from Allah's sight, so I am shy of Him. Right? And subhanAllah. And so this one basically that wherever you go, whether you're locked up at home, you're going driving, whatever you're doing, sleeping at night, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there. He's watching over us. And so because of that, what Hatim Assam said was that he's shy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning that whatever he does, he's conscious of this fact that Allah is there and he wants to do whatever is right, that being shy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that was the first one, which is reliance on Allah. The second one that I wanted to talk about is that we have to be content, right? No matter how much we have, right? Or how little we have, it's still more than others have in this world. And that's something we always have to be able to keep in mind, is that we have to always look back and say, whatever we have, first of all, whatever we have is not a penny more or a penny less than what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already decreed. But whatever we have in this world, subhanAllah, and in living, if you're being able to get on Zoom or on Facebook and listen to this lecture, right? You are one of the select in this world. And that's just the nature of this world. And so Abu Hurairah narrated, the Prophet ﷺ said that wealth is not having vast riches, but it is in contentment, right? And another hadith by Umar al-Khattab, he mentioned one time, he says contentment is a wealth without measure, right? So as long as you have contentment with the decree of Allah, with the whatever provision you've been given from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you are going to be very, 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 very wealthy, more wealthy than anybody else. And I want you to think about this for a second, right? If you're sitting in your living room right now, or in your bedroom, or whatever it is, I want you to look around. And then I want you to get up and I want you to walk towards your kitchen, where your refrigerator is, and just observe things that are going around you as you're walking there. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, He says in Surah Waqi'ah, in translation, He says, and fruit that they may choose, and the flesh of fowls that they desire. And then a few verses later, right, He says, no evil will they hear therein, nor any sinful speech, but the only saying of Salam and Salam. Now, I want you to think about this. What I just mentioned to you, am I describing to you Jannah, or am I describing to you your home, right? And that's the one of the things you have to keep in mind, is that, subhanAllah, a lot of times when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing to us Jannah, gardens gardens that are underneath which rivers flow, which means basically lush greenery. MashaAllah, you have it in Malaysia and in Indonesia. You have couches that they can recline upon, fruit of many, many different kind. Even in our pantries and those type of things, we have bananas, apples, or oranges, dragon fruit, everything that we could desire, we have it. And whatever flesh or fowls that we want, we have chicken, we have lamb, we have beef, we have all different types of even meat that we have. This is not something that the majority of the world ever had, and majority of the world doesn't have right now, and we have it, mashallah. And so we have to always be able to keep in mind. And then because we're, mashallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has gifted us with Islam, right? We know whenever we walk into our houses, whenever we see our children, we see our loved ones, those type of things, right? Especially during the month of Ramadan, right? All we are hearing is there's no evil speech that's going on. There's no sinful speech, but there is everybody constantly giving us salam, right? Giving us salam, meaning that you might be giving it to your spouse, you might be giving it to children giving it to you, all around you right now. Especially if you're at home, all we're hearing is salam and salam, subhanallah. And so, even though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing Jannah, we can actually take this and say, subhanallah, I have it in my own house, right? That's how lucky we really are. And imagine if we think that we're getting nervous about whatever's happening with COVID-19 and those type of things. Back in January, I visited a Rohingya camp in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh. And, the close quarters, the lack of sanitation, all those things, I shudder sometimes to think of what would happen if COVID-19 ended up happening in one of the camps, or for that matter in Africa, right? I mean, we're able to stay home, but what about them who have to go out to be able to seek the provision that they have? And so that's why being content is something very important. And so the first one I mentioned as a reminder was reliance on Allah, right? And the second one was being content. The third one that I want to mention is the remembrance of Allah, right? This is very, very important, especially during the month of Ramadan. In Surah Ra'ad, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, right? He says, verily through the remembrance of Allah, do hearts find rest. Verily through the remembrance of Allah, do hearts find rest. So calm yourself down. Whenever you think about the future and you're feeling a little bit of anxiety, what's really happening, calm yourself down by making dhikr of Allah. And what type of dhikr do you make? Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. You make salam on the Prophet. You say astaghfirullah. You seek forgiveness from Allah. And then also in times of hardship, the dua of Yunus alayhi salam is very important. La ilaha illa ant. Subhanaka inni kuntum min al-zalimin. He says, Yunus alayhi salam, he says, no deity except you. La ilaha illa ant. Subhanaka, glory be to you. Inni kuntum min al-zalimin. Verily, I was amongst the wrongdoers. Right? So that's something that we can constantly be able to do. One time somebody came up to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and was an old man. He said, Ya Rasulullah, I'm an old man, right? And the duties of Islam are very heavy on my back. Meaning I have a hard time doing them. 5 daily prayers, all of these different things. I have a hard time doing them. I'm an old man. And so he asked the Prophet, he said the Prophet, he asked the Prophet, told him, give me something that I can do, right? And I can do it regularly, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept it and grant me paradise. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam responded back and he said, keep your tongue wet with the remembrance of Allah. Keep your tongue wet with the remembrance of Allah, right? And so that's something that's really, really important. And so what forms of dhikr? I just mentioned to you, one of the forms is to basically constantly keep your tongue. Remember, salam on the Prophet, istighfar, the dua of Yunus alayhi salam. The second thing you can do is read Quran. Reading Quran is another form of dhikr, right? And one of the most miraculous things that I found every time I read the Quran, on a daily basis, whenever I pick up the Quran, whatever is happening in my life, right? Whatever I'm thinking about, whatever I'm pondering over, whatever it might be, my anxiety, whenever I pick up the Quran and I start reading, within a short period of time, there's an answer for me in there. SubhanAllah, it's like, every time, whatever page you pick up and you start reading, and that's the miraculous nature of the Quran, is that the answers are there in it to be able to calm yourself down, to be able to kind of think to yourself, alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control. So reciting of the Quran, right? And then to doing tadabbur, which is a reflection on different sections of the Quran, is very, very important to be able to do that. And then the other part of this dhikr, the highest form, as Imam Ghazali mentions, right? The highest form of dhikr that we have is to be able to do salah, right? To be able to do salah. Why? Because, if dhikr is only done with the tongue, that's one faculty that you're using. If Quran is being read, maybe you're doing it with your tongue and your eyes. Maybe your ears are listening to whatever you're reciting. So that's 3 faculties. But in salah, right, all of your faculties are being used in the remembrance of Allah. And so salah is very, very important. And this is, Ramadan is like the shahr salah. This is the month of salah, right? We have if you get up for suhoor in the morning, you can pray a couple of rakat before you start your meal. Then we have the 5 daily prayers. We're sitting at home, likely maybe doing not as much as we used to before. Pray your sunnah prayers, right? Make it a habit now in this Ramadan that you're going to take up being able to do your sunnah prayers. And then after we finish, yes, we don't have tarawih going to the masjid, but there's nothing wrong with doing it at home. In fact, in doing it tarawih at home, we're actually going back to the original ways of the Prophet ﷺ and the companions, right? That's what they used to do. We sometimes we forget that the implementation of tarawih in the masjid only happened during the time of Umar ibn Khattab. And so we have this opportunity to be able to do that. So take the opportunity with your family, all alone, whatever you decide, to be able to do Salat Tarawih. And then, as I mentioned to you, Tahajjud, very, very important to be able to do that. So remembrance of Allah in these 3 forms. And the highest of this form is going to be doing Salah for that. And then the other one, and this might be a little bit counterintuitive. So what did we talk about so far? We've talked about reliance on Allah. We've talked about being content. And we mentioned remembrance of Allah. And there's only a couple more left, inshallah. So the next one that I wanted to mention is that in times like these, right? And it might be something that's counterintuitive, but this is the time when you want to give sadaqah. You want to give charity and you want to fulfill your zakat, right? And as I mentioned to you, I know it's like, I might be hurting. I don't know what's going to happen in my life. But why would I want to do that? Why would I want to give out to in times like this? Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions, right? And he says that wealth, mal, right, will not decrease. Ma naqasa mal bis-sadaqah. That wealth will not decrease when you give out in sadaqah, right? And so we have to basically say, if we want more, we have to give more. And I want to kind of conclude this prayer, charity, or zakat part of it by a story. And the story is about Musa alayhi salam. And Musa alayhi salam, he used to go around, he used to give da'wah in different towns, different cities, and that type of thing. So there's one town or village that he came to, and he was giving da'wah, calling people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there was a poor man, and he came to Musa alayhi salam, and he said, "Oh Musa, right? Oh Musa, please, make a dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives me wealth, right? And if He does that, I'm gonna give half of my wealth away to the poor." And Musa, kind of disregards him, keeps on with his dawah, and then he leaves. The next day he comes back and he's giving the dawah to the same town, the same person, the poor person comes up and he says, "Oh Musa, right? You are the prophet of Allah and your prayers are answered. Make a dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives me more rizq. And when He does that, I'm going to give half of it away in charity." And then again, Musa doesn't, do anything. He basically just writes him off and then keeps going. The third day comes around, and again, the same poor person comes to him and says, "Ya Musa, you are prophet of Allah, right? Your prayers are answered. Please make a dua for me that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives me wealth. And if He does that, I'm going to give half of my wealth away." And so Musa, just to be now realizing that this person is not going to leave him alone, right? He says, he makes a dua to Allah and he says, "Oh Allah, give him some wealth." And then he moves on. And so he goes away, goes and starts doing dawah in another town and all of those different types of things. And he comes back years later. Yeah, years go by and then he comes back to the town. But this time when he comes back, the same village, there's a little bit of difference. At the end of the village, there's a palace. And next to the palace, there's like if you want to call them dining halls, large, huge dining halls, right? And so he asked the person, what is this? Whose palace is this? And whose dining halls are these? And so nobody's able to ask him. So he walks up to the palace and he talks to the owner. And the owner says, "Don't you remember me, Musa? I was that poor person that you asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give wealth to, and I had promised that I would give half my wealth away. And so when you did that and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me wealth, right? I gave half it away, meaning that I built myself a palace and I built a dining hall so that all the people could come and they could eat from whatever provision I had. And so when I did that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me more wealth. And when He gave me more wealth, I built another dining hall to be able to accommodate and be able to give my wealth away. And then when I did that, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me more wealth. I had more risk, so I built another one. And so now Musa is very confused. So he makes a dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and he asks Allah and he says, "Ya Allah, right? I asked you to give this man a little bit of wealth, but look, he has so much. How did this happen? And subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answered back to Musa alayhi salam, subhanAllah. And he said, there is no way that I would allow my servant to be more generous than me. There's no way that I would allow my servant to be more generous than me. When you give, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you more. Because there's no way he's going to allow you as a person to be more generous than Allah. It's almost like a, if you want to call it between you and in the Quran, it talks about it from between the people. It says, فَاسْتَبِقُوا الْخَيْرَاتِ, vie with each other in that which is good. But in this particular case, right, vie, give more but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you more, but it's just because of that competition. There's no way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would allow that to happen. So we have to make sure that we are giving in charity, right? So then just kind of as a summary, we talked about having reliance on Allah, having tawakkul. The second one was being content with whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then I mentioned charity and zakat. And the last one that I wanted to mention, and this is an important one, and it relates to this idea of dhikr, or remembrance, and that is dua, right? Never underestimate the power of dua. The Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith, he said, "Ad-du'a mukh al-ibadah," right? Dua is like the, if you want to call it, mukh means like bone marrow of worship, right? The bone marrow, right, is in the bone marrow is all of these cures, and it's the backbone of your entire body. And so that dua is that for the believers, and it is that to the idea of worship. And when we make a dua, especially this is the month of mustajab. This is the month in Ramadan when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will answer our prayers, right? No matter the time of day you're doing it, because as you're fasting, you are constantly in worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But especially also in tahajjud, especially before you break your fast, right? The 5-10 minutes before that, make a sincere dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as if you really, really want it, right? And not only that, but ask Him for more. Don't even be shy of even asking for more. SubhanAllah, in many times in the Quran this happens, but Ibrahim is particularly interesting case study in this. He asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to giving him dominion, or his family, his to be having a raised status amongst the people. And so what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran is that He gave Ibrahim dominion. He gave Ibrahim that status. And the first thing that Ibrahim does, he says, and what about my descendants? Right? He just asked for a little bit more. As soon as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him, he just asked for more. Like, what about this? And so that's what we have to be with ourselves, right? It's always just constantly ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's interesting. Also, one last story that I wanted to mention, and that is about Iblis. Now, subhanAllah, right? When Iblis sins, when he does the act of arrogance, and he doesn't bow down to Adam, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him, you are banished from here. You know what the first thing Iblis does is? He makes a dua to Allah. He says, give me respite, give me time for a little while. And not only that, as a sinner, as the one who committed the gravest sin possible, right? Not listening to Allah in paradise. The first thing that he does when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala banishes him, he makes a dua. And then not only does he make a dua, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers him. He says, okay, I'm going to give you respite. So Iblis can ask and he can get answered, definitely as a begging servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the month of Ramadan. While we are maybe feeling some anxiety, why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not answer us? Right? The power of dua. The power of dua. And the last thing that I wanted to mention, inshallah, in this regard, and I'll close because we're coming up on time. There's a story of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One time he walked into the masjid, and there was a companion who was sitting there. And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Ya Abu Umama, right? Why are you in the masjid when it's not even time for the prayer?" And so Abu Umama looked up at the Prophet ﷺ, and he said, worries and grief, Ya Rasulullah. I have worries, and I have grief, and I have debts. So worries and debts, Ya Rasulullah. And the Prophet ﷺ said, right, I mean, in many, many different occasions, the Prophet ﷺ could have easily, and he used to do that before, He used to ask the companions who can give to this person, who can give to that person, right? Sometimes he would ask for a loan and he would give to the person. But in this particular case, the Prophet ﷺ didn't do that. He said, Ya Abu Mama, should I not give you something that if you do it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take away your worries and he'll pay off your debts for you? And Abu Mama said, yes, Ya Rasulullah, what is that? Right, tell me what that is and I'll make sure to do it as often as possible. The Prophet ﷺ said, in the morning and the evening, I want you to recite, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-hammi wal-hazan, wa na'udhu bika min al-ajli wal-kasal, wa na'udhu bika min al-jubni wal-bukhl, wa na'udhu bika min ghalabati ad-dayn wa qahri rijal. He said, oh Allah, right, in the morning and in the evening, recite, oh Allah, I seek refuge from worries and grief. I seek refuge in you from being weakness and laziness. I seek refuge in you from miserliness and cowardice. And I seek refuge in you from the burden of debt and being being overcome by the anger of men. Right? Now, if you want to learn this dua, then easily you can go Google, right? It just put dua for grief and worries and debt, and you'll be able to pull up this dua, right? Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-hammi wal-hazan, wa na'udhu bika min al-ajli wal-kasal, wa na'udhu bika min al-jubni wal-bukhl, wa na'udhu bika min ghalabati ad-dayn wa qahri rijal. Right? And so the Abu Mama in this hadith, he goes on and he says that I did that, meaning that he did this in the morning and in the evening. And the ways of the companions was, once they actually started something, they never let it go. So he did this consistently, we would assume, for this entire life. And what Abu Mama says was that he did that, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took away my worries, and he paid off my debts for me. Right, subhanAllah. And this is the exact idea that we're talking about. When we ask Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Udu'uni astajib lakum. If you ask me, I will answer you. Right? And in the verses in the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals verses of Shahr Ramadan, right? Unzila ilayka Quran. So when he tells us about Ramadan, right? In a couple of verses after that, and this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, right? If they ask you concerning me, right? Tell them I am near. I answer the call of the caller who calls upon me. So we are in the month of Ramadan, right? And we might be very, very in need of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we call upon him as fasting individuals, as people who might be in grief, or as people who might be in debt, as people who might have anxiety, all we have to do is ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he will answer us, right? He will answer us. If he can answer shaitan, why would he not answer our du'as? It wouldn't be in the majesty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be able to do that. So I wanted to kind of mention that as well. And so with that, inshallah, I wanted to kind of close off, because this was such a comprehensive hadith. I want to go back to the very beginning of the first hadith that I gave, right? And this hadith, to me, I like to be able to read this backwards, because it makes sense to me a little bit better. It calms me a little bit more. Where the last thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says on the authority of Abdullah bin Abbas, he says the pens have been lifted and the pages have been dried, right? Meaning in the Lawh al-Mahfuz, which is sitting in Jannah, everything has been written. The past, the present, the future, they're all the same, and they've been already done. There's nothing you can do to change that. Right? The decree of Allah is already there. This is part of our belief. This is part of our iman, Qadr, in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So just rely on that and keep your heart at rest, right? And then the second part of it, which basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if the entire nation, all the nation, forget nation, entire mankind was to gather together to benefit you in something, right? They would not be able to do that except if Allah already had willed it. And even if they had gathered to basically do some harm to you, then they would not be able to harm you except with what Allah has already prescribed for you. There's nothing anybody else can do. Not COVID-19, not the MCO, not the stay home, not your boss, nothing. Nobody can do anything except that's already been written and it's already guaranteed for you, right? And then the coming back full circle to the dua that I mentioned, right? The Prophet ﷺ mentioned, he says, be mindful of Allah and Allah will protect you. Right? Be mindful of Allah and Allah will protect you. Be mindful of Allah and you will find him in front of you. Meaning that Allah will remember him in hardship and he's going to remember you in ease. right? That's the whole idea. Remember him in ease, and he's going to remember you in hardship. So we have to constantly be mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will turn around and do that. And then he says, if you seek help, then seek help from Allah alone, right? Yes, there might be people who might be helping you, but they are only vehicles to be able to deliver the help that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had decreed. So inshallah, with that, I want to close. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive me for anything that I've said that might be in error. That is only from my own shortcomings, and whatever benefit you get it from this, this is only from the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر ولكم واستغفروه.
Barakallahu feek, Monem. Great talk once again. Very practical, very easy to understand, and something we can take away from this definitely as soon as we close down here. We do have a few questions, but if any of you who are listening in now have any questions, you can ask the questions directly via Zoom or in the comment fields in Facebook Live. The first question we're having, Brother Monem, is how can we help others going through challenging times at the moment, who's going through anxiety and who needs help? How can we help them if we ourselves are having the upper hand right now?
Yeah. So subhanAllah, I mean, this is again going back to a couple of different things that we can do. There's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. He says that if you see something wrong, if you see something, then try to correct it with your heart, right? And that is, sorry, he says try to correct it with your hands, meaning do something about it, with something physical that you can do. Help somebody out, give money to them, or help them out with some ease, that type of thing. If you can't do that, then do it with your tongue, meaning you can make a dua for the person. That's the least that we can do with our tongues, right? Give them a positive word, or make a dua for them. And don't ever we should never negate the power of even just a dua. But even if we can't do that, then we should do something. We just have some type of a thing within our heart. Either it's an inclination towards helping them, or if it's something evil, you're basically saying, no, I want to stay away from it. And the Prophet ﷺ said that is the weakest of faith. Right? And so it's important for us to remember that whatever we can do, how can we help? Yes, you might be in, if that person, it could be many, many different things that they're going through. It could be if they're going through some financial hardships. Again, going back to the idea of charity, giving the sadaqah to the person, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never make that decrease for you, from you. And then when you give that, you have to know that it's not you that's giving it, right? But that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is only making you a vehicle for whatever risk that person already had. It's done. It's already guaranteed for the person, right? All you're doing is you're being that vehicle, and you're just getting the reward for that person. And then if you ever have this doubt about giving to the person, right? Then the easiest thing to remember is that the giving is not benefiting the person, it's benefiting you. And that's what you have to remember. Right? Is that the person, remember what I mentioned to you, the risk is already done, decree is already there. He's going to get that risk no matter what happens. You are just the one who's getting the benefit for being the one that provided it for him. So with hopefully that, there's some motivation for you to go out there and help as many people as you can.
Absolutely. Barakallahu feek. The second question is, so during Ramadan, we are all concentrating on our ibadah. We read the Quran, we pray a little bit extra. But as soon as Ramadan is over, very often people go back to their daily life, and they get distracted with all sorts of things. How do we constantly remind ourselves of being content with what we have, inclusive our challenges in life?
Shimano, what a good question. Thank you for that. I mean, I told you, I mean, we're all human beings. I do the same thing, right? But that doesn't negate the benefit of Ramadan. So here's as a practical thing. I mean, I remember I was asking me that there's a story where some of the companions, and I don't know the exact reference to it, but there were some of the companions that were complaining to the Prophet that they were being hypocrites. Right, that they were being hypocrites. So the Prophet asked them, "Why is that? Why are you doing that?" And they said, "Whenever we are with you or in the masjid, Ya Rasulullah, right, we're thinking about Islam, we're thinking about you, the love of Allah. But as soon as we walk out, our daily lives get the best of us, and we get sucked into the practicality of life, right?" And the Prophet ﷺ, he responded back and said, "That's the nature of life, right? That's our nature that we have. But there are certain times that certain things happen. So my encouragement to you is that don't let that bother you, right? Do a couple of things. And again, I'm trying to be as practical as possible, right? Pick up 1 or 2 habits in Ramadan, just 1 or 2. Whether it be that, for example, that you never did your sunnah prayers. Don't even start doing all of those. Just take 1 sunnah prayer and just start doing that one. Maybe it's the important ones that you know of that are what are called sunnah mu'akkada, are the ones 2 sunnah before fajr and the 2 sunnahs after maghrib. Just pick that up and make it consistent habit to do that. What happens, unfortunately, is that we basically get into Ramadan, we try to become super Muslims, and then we burn out towards the end of Ramadan. But really, it's more a matter of taking it methodically. Now, listen to this, and I was kind of reminded of this the other day. Imagine, right, that there's a person who started maybe at the age of 20, right, and he decided that every year, right, that he was going to memorize 1 dua. Just 1 dua that he wasn't want to remember. So we're taking it slowly. Okay, 1 dua. By the time if the same person in his 50s, right, if he knows 30 dua and he's able to recite them, you're going to say, mashallah, this person is so knowledgeable that he knows 30 dua that he has. But all he was doing was memorizing 1 dua a year, right? And you can do that with the Quran. Maybe memorize 1 surah a year, right? Maybe memorize 1 ayah a year, whatever it is that you want to do. But that's something that we have to kind of consistent, keep it small and keep it going. The other part of it is, right? Ramadan, one of the blessings of Ramadan is it is that type of detoxification for us. It is a time for us to be able to focus on ourselves, to be able to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we come out of this and not be able to do exactly what we're doing in Ramadan, that's perfectly fine, right? All we have to do is do a little bit about just that small taste of that. And the last thing that I wanted to mention was, the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, as soon as Ramadan was over, right, they used to make a dua that, oh Allah, accept our deeds in Ramadan, but allow us to live long enough to see another Ramadan. Meaning they were already looking forward to that next year. And that's what we have to constantly be able to do, right, to be able to do that. One last thing that I wanted to mention, if you really like the idea of Ramadan, Ramadan, one of the major, but not the only, and actually not even the biggest aspect of Ramadan is fasting. So I encourage you to do because fasting puts you into a mode where you are in constant ibadah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, he says that all the other acts are for yourself, but siyamu li, meaning that the fasting is for me. So throughout the year, right, and I'm going to make an effort to try to do this this year as well, is try to fast on Mondays and Thursdays. Or if you can't even do that, try to fast the Ayyam al-Abid, which is the 3 middle days of the month of every single month. Just take opportunities to fast, and the fasting will get you, inshallah, to that level.
The next question is very short, but I can imagine the answer has to be very deep. How do you keep fear in check?
Oh, that is a short question with a deep answer.
Yes.
How do you keep fear in check? Again, I think what I would do, right? And again, it's one of those things that these are just reminders, and a lot of times we're going to do is we're going to stray, and then we're going to get reminded, and we're going to come back, and that's a perfectly human thing to do, right? In fact, in one of the hadith al-Qudsi, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that if my servant was to sin and not repent, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would replace those people with another people who actually sinned and then repented. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is wanting you to repent. That's the nature of human. The nature of human beings is not to be perfect. If that was the case, we would be angels. We're not that way. We are by nature we will sin because we'll fall into error. But the idea for us to go back and do tawbah. So what I would say is, if you have any kind of a fear, then just remember the hadith that I mentioned to you earlier, that was narrated by Abdullah ibn Abbas, right? That no matter what happens, right, calm yourself down, because no matter what happens, it's already been taken care of. That's one. Number two is always be making dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Dhikr means on the tongue, dhikr means dua, and dhikr means salah. Always be able to do that. And as soon as you have this idea of that one of the fears would be a sudden kind of a khawf, right? Which is, oh my God, that kind of striking fear. In those times, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Say astaghfirullah, or say la hawla wa la quwwata, no power or glory more than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Say those type of things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will calm you down, because He mentions in the Quran, He says, verily, to the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest. Your fear will go and your heart will be at rest when you make dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
And then the last question. So we all make a lot of dua. I mean, we keep making dua after our salah. We make dua, especially during Ramadan. But the thing is, how do we know whether our dua is being answered or not?
Thank you for the question. Subhanallah, I think we have to look at it. I mean, it really depends on what dua it is, right? Because what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, for example, du'as are not answered in our time. Du'as are answered in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's time, meaning that when you make a dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right, He will answer you as a humble servant. He will answer you when the best time it is for that answer to come. And a lot of times, right, like for example, let's supposing you make a dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that says, oh Allah, right, allow me to get this new job that I'm applying for, right? And that's a perfectly good dua to make. When you do that, if that job is not the best thing for you from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that is also an answer of the dua, right? Meaning that maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected you from getting that job for some other reason, right? And those kind of the unseen that we don't know, right? Those are the things that we should always remember, that, okay, it didn't happen, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected me from something that I thought I needed this job, but Allah knew better, that I didn't need this job. Or that's how you kind of think about when you're making dua. But really, if you want to think about it, right? And there's nothing wrong with asking for specific things in dua, right? I want a new phone, or I want a new car, or those type of things. But we have to remember that we have an example of a person that made the best of du'as. If you want your du'as answered, make the du'as that the Prophet ﷺ used to make, because his du'as were answered. And so if you're asking for something, do it in the way that the Prophet ﷺ asked the questions, right? And he basically was able to whatever. So getting up in the morning, he used to make dhikr, he used to make dua anytime during the day. Whatever he was asking for, he would ask and he would make dua. So we have to make dua as we do with the Prophet ﷺ. So that's what I would tell you, is that remember. And the last thing I want to mention about that Allah will answer it, but it might not be in your time. There's two things I want to mention. One of them is that when Ibrahim alayhi salam made the dua of having his descendants blessed, right, from the family tree of Ishaq, that prayer was answered right away. From the family tree of Ismail, right, it took 2,000 years, but his dua was answered, right? So this is not in our judgment to be able to say when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers the prayer. It's up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do that.
Monem, I know you have to go to work. Can you take one more question?
Sure.
Okay. There's a question that goes like, it's so if you start doubting about Islam, and this causes anxiety, does this mean that this person is lost, or what can this person do?
Bismillah. I think the best thing to do in that particular situation, and it actually depends on that individual. There must be something specific that's going on in their life, or those type of things. What I would tell you is, right, if you have any type of doubts, go back to the basics. And the basics are, right, to read the Quran, because the Quran is a constant reminder to us of the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? The reminder to us of what is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept and what He will not. The Quran is something that will lift your spirits, and it'll be able to give you that sense of confidence to be able to have that faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala itself. Now remember, right, the doubt itself, right, is not what's bad. It's what you do with that doubt. It's going to cause you to either do good or bad. Because that doubt could lead you to making more ibadah, which then it became a benefit. Or that doubt could lead you astray, which obviously could be harm. And so I think it's really important to you to be able to, as soon as you feel that doubt, right, you basically make it more of an effort to be able to do what's right, right? And remember, I want to be able to highlight, and like I said, I'm not a scholar, but I think what I'm reminded of constantly when I read the Quran, right, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioning that the believers will go to paradise and the non-believers will go to hellfire, right? There's no qualification for that. Believers will go to paradise and the non-believers will not. All of us on the call, as long as we're believers, alhamdulillah, we're taken care of. That's what the Quran's message is. Everything that comes afterwards, you have to basically do this, do that, and what the Prophet said, yes, it's important. But let's go back to the basic, right? You believe in Allah and His Messenger, you'll be in paradise. You don't, you're going to go hellfire. And that when you start there, you can begin to build a foundation of being able to have that tawakkul and have that reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Monem, barakallahu fiqh for your time. As usual, no practical, very deep, but so easy to understand. For the viewers, if you enjoyed this talk, please visit Monem Salem's YouTube page. You'll be able to find similar talks like this, a lot of his khutbahs from Malaysia. I don't know whether you also have some from the US, but definitely something we can all benefit from. When it comes to our talks, you can find them on Muslim Circle O on YouTube as well. You can also look up some of the videos on our Facebook page. We will be back again, but remember so we'll be back again same time tomorrow, Friday, and during weekends, it's 5 p.m. Malaysian time, 4 p.m. Jakarta time. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. And Monem, once again, thank you very much. And hopefully see you again. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.